Hello and welcome to our webinar today. My name's Emma and I'm the marketing manager here at SafePass for those of you who don't know me already. Topic for today's webinar is understand new technology and security risks as you respond to COVID-19. We are delighted today to have presenting SafePass CEO Adil Khan and Altum Strategy Group Director Daniel Miller. A big warm welcome to you both. Adil, would you like to give us a little introduction?
Yeah, as always, appreciate all of you out there attending our monthly educational series. We're really excited to have one of our strategic partners join us today. I'll let Dan introduce himself in a minute, but we have had an opportunity to work with Dan in previous organizations as well. So it's good to have teaming up with them again on this critical topic, and they have some really great insight to share with us today in a timely way. The agenda for today, just quickly before we get into introductions, we'll introduce Altum partners. Are excited to have them as our new partner onboarded, enabled, and ready to go to service SafePass clients. We'll talk a little bit about what are the technology risks, which is obviously the topic of today, and we'll talk of the risks in terms of different aspects. This presentation obviously is for enterprise, so it's got different aspects of the risk, not just technology, but how technology impacts finance, operations, customers, etc. And then I'll discuss a little bit about some of the tools and techniques that our customers have adopted to address those risks and manage the risk, assess the risks, and share a case study at the end, as we always do, to kind of bring some real world battle experience for you to try out in your own organization as well. So with that, I'll just do a quick intro and I'll turn it over to Dan. So I am the CEO here at SafePass. We were previously known as Fulcrum Way, and about 5 years ago we started shifting to a product company. But in the end of the day, our products are based on 15 plus years of experience we have at 200 some customers, helping them with GRC challenges. And so the products are essentially to address those challenges, and therefore we're seeing a success in the market. I've written a book on this topic also, a governance risk and compliance handbook for Oracle. That's my background. Dan, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Adil, and thanks to everybody on the call today. My name is Dan Miller. I'm a director of Altum Strategy Group, focusing on delivering key strategic areas such as business application support process, standardization, and compliance strategies. Here at Altum, our goal is to help partner with our clients to deliver on key activities and meet deadlines and deliver key results.
Okay, so just a quick introduction on us. I think most of you know us. I'll keep it really brief. We are actively involved in thought leadership events around the world on 5 continents. Obviously, this is a unique year for us, so a lot more webinars. We just did one with the user group, the Oracle user group here in the US. We're doing similar things with ISACA and IIA around the world. And so, yeah, we're here to learn on the challenges the customers market is facing and help solve those problems. And that's our mission at SafePass. Go ahead, Dan.
Sure. Here at Altum Strategy Group, we were founded based on the principle of providing top-tier service to our clients and business partners. Our approach enables our partners to see around corners to develop processes and work through challenges. We seek to be a strategic partner, assisting with all challenges in an ever-changing digital environment. And one of the key differentiators in the marketplace for us is we provide a view of organizations through 3 lenses, those being the people, process, and technologies. And what we do is through those lenses, enable a holistic view of the challenges and ultimately deliver a complete solution. So first up, let's take a look at how we got here. So in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainties around the impacts of the COVID-19 virus. These uncertainties led to significant public health concerns, and as more facts have come out, more organizations have really found new ways to deal with the virus. As a result of the virus and the initial uncertainties, the initial response of the organizations was to move to a remote workforce almost in an overnight fashion. Organizations focused and prioritized the safety, health, and operating efficiencies of team members, while other priorities like customer acquisition moved down the list. With the move to a remote workforce, the IT teams struggled for a significant number of organizations. They struggled to meet the needs of the organization moving to this remote model through the deployment of several key hardware type items, most significantly laptops, monitors, and work from home items, as well as needing to deliver upscaled networks, VPN, and other remote capabilities. Finally, IT departments were tasked with provisioning a number of mobile devices such as laptops, tablets, and mobile phones to facilitate the remote workforce. As we move kind of into the third stage of our model here, we've really seen a stabilization of the remote workforce. Within the last few weeks, we've seen large organization becomes far more efficient, enabling commitment to the long-term remote work. Key organizations have been, Facebook, Twitter, and other large entities. And finally, as we move into what we refer to as the new normal, we expect to see a further stabilization of the remote workforce, leveraging key data points more rapidly, empowering all of us to respond almost hourly to update our approach and our operating environment. As we move to the next couple slides, we'll look at the key emerging risks. We'll start with the financial risks, move to operational, talk about the supply chain and customer risks, key data risks, and then the remote workforce. But first, we'll turn it over to Adil to discuss the new business technology and security challenges.
Yeah, so Emma and I were kind of looking for what's already out there so we can leverage the knowledge from our partners and research organizations. And this seemed really timely to the topic. And so I thought we kind of shared that with you, validated by the market, so to speak. So what Kohn Resnick did is a paper on the technology risk specifically, and we have picked some of the things that are relevant to this topic today. So the big thing that we're seeing is this breakdown in the process workflow, right? As we're moving, as Dan said, moving to this remote mode for some time, it looks like it's going to be more than just a few weeks. We're 2+ months into this, and from what I'm reading and what you probably are reading is the same, that most companies are giving employees options to continue working from home. Many of the companies that in our industry, for example, tech industry, are giving till at least the year end to be able to work from home. So that's great. I mean, it's for the health, as we discussed earlier, but it does impact the way our workflows are organized. So we don't have those meetings, and so we have to rely more on. So basically, the process risk is there, and so the systems that support those processes, whether your ERP system like Oracle or cloud systems, Workday, whatever you have, those have to be tweaked and adjusted. And we'll talk a little bit about some technology solutions a little bit later. But that's one of the top things that has bubbled up in the surveys that we have seen from this partner of ours. Sustained remote work is here. We have to make it more sustainable. So people are looking for, okay, it's one thing to just flip the switch and give everybody VPN access and Zoom meetings or whatever they need, but it's another to ensure that safety and security and safeguard of information. So just kind of as we have elevated access into our critical business systems, is it sustainable? Is it something that we can manage remotely? Those are the questions that are coming up as challenges. Security to critical systems, automation of again processes, and accounting issues, right? So most of our clients at SafePass are publicly listed companies on U.S. stock exchanges, and so the filing requirements have not been changed a whole lot, other than some of the tax filings. Your SEC filings, the 10Ks, the 10Qs are just as important as they were, but there are additional concerns around financial statements, the impact on your assets and liabilities, being able to report those. So there's quite a bit of material out there around treating those accounting entries. Same thing with your accounts payable. Supply chains are impacted, accounts receivable, customers are impacted, and the close process itself is impacted because it's difficult to look at the 3-ring binders that are shared in many mid to large companies where all accounting departments sit in a single floor, if not in the vicinity of each other. And then cyber attacks are up. There's a webinar we did, I think last month, that has some good stats on protecting your assets and data against cyber attacks. So yeah, that's something to watch out for as always, but it's growing as a risk. So these are some of the challenges around where technology and security can help. And so let's take a look at some more data from McKinsey that talks a little bit about, from an industry standpoint, where the challenges are. So we obviously serve all of these different industries. We have, customers like, Screen Actors Guild, and then industry, TV Guide, et cetera, et cetera. We have banking customers. A number of our banks, major banks around the world, use SafePass. So it looks like each industry is slightly different, and that's good to know. So if you're looking to your peers, this I thought would be helpful to you for you to do a self-assessment of a very recent survey that was done by McKinsey just last month here. And what that tells me is that the way to get better protection is to digitize your process more, right? So the more digital it is, whether you're working from home or you're up and running, or you're relying on your customers and suppliers to continue that supply chain and your role in that supply chain, that's one way to respond to the pandemic, is by having that level of digitization. So think of areas where your process and workflows are impacted, and take a look at where you have gaps, and then consider replacing digital from manual. So a very basic example that I saw an email from one of my clients this morning is they're rolling out self-service user access management with SafePass. That's something that's been on their plate for some time, but right now, given the current environment, they're doing a global rollout. The telecom industry in Latin America, so they have, I think 15 plus business units in different countries within, and thousands of users. So instead of overtaxing and burdening the help desk, what they're doing is using SafePass to request self-service. Users can request access. It goes through a access controls test, or for data privacy and segregation of duties and other checkboxes they have on policy, and then it goes through multiple levels of approval and then gets granted. So that's an example of self-service workflow enabled process with embedded controls that takes the burden away from IT security and help desk and management in general, control owners, to have that proactive control. So the cost of reactive audit findings is extremely high in this environment. So that's an example of digital process enablement that where we can help. And then the response itself, it's almost, this slide should be before the next one to make better sense. But the level of remote work, as Dan was saying, this validates that, right? It's during the lockdown period or shelter at home, shelter in place is impacting the employee population and different areas and categorization of that employee population. Again, same survey that McKinsey conducted very recently. So you can see that the increase in information services is 75%, right? So significant improvement. Information service companies seem to be leading that trend. Same thing with professional services, so accounting firms would fall into that, business service providers, financial organizations and so forth would fall into that, insurance companies, for example. So you're seeing a big shift and increase in that remote work. That's sort of the underlying tectonic shift that we're seeing from our customers. And then, even in manufacturing, where you would imagine that, people have to be in the factories building products, you're seeing a big uptick in manufacturing and obviously in education. So yeah, so that is the response that we're seeing, and we're going to talk a little bit about what does that do to your risk as you respond to the pandemic, and how do we make each of your businesses more resilient. So with that, Dan, if you can kind of talk about, what are you seeing in the emerging risks based on the trends I just shared with the webinar attendees, and give us some ideas and your insight on how you're dealing with your clients that are coming to you with these types of risks in response to COVID-19.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So as we look at the top and move in a clockwise fashion here, we'll start with the key financial risks. First one is, of course, the financial positions. As many organizations are struggling in the supply chain area, which we'll get into in a greater detail in further slides, they're having to deal with a lot of late or missing payments from struggling customers. Additionally, as we touched on in the previous slide, the workflows, the controls that are based on in-office proximity, so that over the cubicle communication that's become a little more difficult these days. Additionally, there's also the impacts of the new stimulus programs. Organizations are really unclear on how they'll need to account and deal with some of the items from the payroll protection program in the US. And as Adil mentioned, the closing process, the journal entries, and challenges there. As we move to the operational side, we see many organizations having difficulty with inconsistent supplies. And as we get into the supply chain again further, we'll talk about that in greater detail. We touched briefly on the and it's really created a lot of hardships in a lot of areas for organizations. The third piece, as we move into a more IT-focused area, are the IT remote risks. We've all implemented collaboration platforms and a new level of information sharing. What this has done is this has opened up a great deal of additional opportunity for data leaks within the environment. And as we discussed in one of the opening slides, the mobile devices, the personal use devices, tablets, phones, personal PCs that may be at greater risk of being used in the environment. And finally, as we look at the customer risks, there's a great deal of economic uncertainty for customers. There's a great deal of government regulation and changes here in the US that are having an impact on the consumer's buying power. Additionally, for a lot of organizations, the new customer acquisition process that we discussed is starting to reemerge as a priority after making sure that their remote workforce has the safety and security that they need. So on the next slide, we'll do a deep dive into the financial risks. First off are the cash positions. Some organizations are struggling with the amount of liquidity they need to maintain due to challenges on the customer side. Additionally, when we talk about credit, there's two pieces to this. There's extending credit to long-standing customers, managing the relationships that may go back a number of years, but maybe it's extremely challenging as a result of the pandemic. But there's also making sure that your own organization has enough credit on their own to extend and help get them through challenging times. As we move down into the planning, budgeting, and forecasting, the uncertainty that we mentioned from some customers and also some suppliers have really made the operations, as well as the operation side, as well as the budgeting, very difficult. Key impacts there have been to both the finance teams and some of the other operational folks. And as we touched on also in the previous slide, there are the reporting risks. There's the close process. There's the impact, again, of the potential payroll protection program offered by the Small Business Administration in the U.S. And evolving government regulations are also playing a part in the challenging times here. Some organizations are not clear what the impact will be if that PPP program that we mentioned will become a loan rather than a grant if certain conditions aren't met. So let's move on to the customer and supply chain risks. You really can't look at all the risks in the issue in the pandemic without examining pretty deeply the impact on the supply chain. But before we look into the supply chain as a true chain and process, I think we've really got to look at the entities and the challenges each different group faces in the process. On the supplier side, we're seeing a lot of challenges in the delivery of raw materials. The manufacturer side, we're seeing a number of manufacturers dealing with at-risk suppliers and an unstable workforce. And that unstable workforce, as you see it transition down into the distributors' challenges, can be due to different items, a number of different factors. The distributor, as I mentioned, faces the unstable workforce challenge, as well as changing state and local regulations. State and local regulations, of course, meaning can the plant stay open? What safety measures must be put in place? And what generally are good practices? And finally, when we get to the customer and consumer, a lot of organizations view them as a single entity. But what we've done is we've broken them out to show some of the different challenges that they both face. The customer faces an inconsistent consumer and retail closures. Some of the retail challenges are that some big box stores are allowed to stay open because one or two or several of their items are considered necessary, while others may not be. And in that case, we've seen some interesting changes as far as what consumers can actually purchase in those big box stores. Of course, the impact to mom and pop stores in the US is that they're less allowed to open and sell their very targeted items. As we look in the consumer, we've really seen a lot of economic uncertainty, partly due to the panic buying. Of course, that's a circular process, and we've all seen the news on shortages on store shelves for key staple items. So let's move on and take a look at the supply chain on the next slide in an actual chain. We see each of the entities here lined up. And as we look at this, one of the impacts that we've seen for within the chain, Adil, if you can click to the next item there. Anytime there's an impact within the chain at any point, there's a number of different impacts throughout the remainder of the chain to both the forward-looking and backward-looking entities. And as we move forward, we see that any impact between the manufacturing and the distribution space and a deal, if you can click ahead, is going to directly impact the supplier on the backside, meaning that the supplier is going to have a lot of material that they were forecasting to send to the manufacturers just can't accept. The distributors clearly don't have any manufactured goods to distribute, and the customers and consumers are left out in the cold as well. What this has done for customers and consumers is put a lot of pricing pressure on finished goods. We've seen this happen in the U.S. in the meat packing industry, where a lot of farmers and ranchers are really having trouble selling their raw materials to the distributors and meat packers because they're just not open. And if you click ahead one more time, Adil, you see that even though the raw material side is really pretty far back in the chain, you see that there's still an impact there. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at the internal operations of the organization and look at the data risks emerging from COVID-19. Some of the risks that we've seen have come from incomplete analysis and identification. Some of these analysis and identification items have been to a lack of anticipation on the need to access key systems, key data items from a remote environment. Moving on to the second piece, we've seen challenges in the policy definition. And again, some policies haven't been robust enough to capture the need to work in a long-term manner, specifically how data reports, spreadsheets, PDFs should be stored. Should they be available on a collaboration platform that allows access to broad teams or focused users? As we look at the data classification of the organization, this item is very close to the policy definition. Do organizations have enough granularity in their data classification to really drive a robust policy? And finally, the assessments. Some organizations focus their assessments on confirming what they already know, confirming that key items are in fact protected. And really what these assessments should be doing is they should be focusing on where are our new risks? Are we protecting what we have, and can we protect it further? And finally, ongoing ownership. And the concern here has really been whether ownership as part of the remote workforce has taken their responsibilities directly to that remote workforce. Are they able to understand the new risks with those collaboration platforms and how they impact the data and how they can communicate how the data and these platforms should be used? On the next slide, we'll do a deep dive into the remote working risks. So as we touched on previously, there's been a rapid device deployment. Almost overnight, IT organizations were moved to deliver laptops, monitors, scale infrastructure in a very quick manner. The question there is, have those devices been hardened properly and protected from new risks? The second item there is all the additional endpoints in the organization using VPN. In some cases, these VPN solutions were not set up and had to scale rapidly to meet the need. We've also seen a number of new multi-factor authentication needs and implementations in the organization, really enabling that remote device use. The next item is training. Are team members aware of the remote risks due to working from home? What key processes have been changed, what have been updated, and how have they been communicated to the broader team? And as we move down the item, of course, there's been a significant increase in cybersecurity risks, increased phishing, hacking, third-party attacks. As we move over to the right side, we've seen the collaboration tools and use grow exponentially. These tools are great when we talk about sharing data, sharing reports, sharing key items in that manner. But they've also opened up a number of holes for organizations due to unsecured channels and storage methods. The fifth item is the mobile office. As we move from our in-office configuration to, in some cases, the kitchen table, and as we continue to move as the economy opens up to remote offices, coffee houses, other places of that nature, we will likely see team members leaving laptops open in public areas, not using simple items like privacy screens. And finally, employee efficiency. Now, this doesn't seem like a risk, but as organizations have opened up a lot of processes, procedures, and new means of working, the question there is, have organizations opened up too much? And have they made it so easy to work from remote that they've opened up a lot of new opportunities for security risks? And now I'll turn it over to Adil to discuss the technology and risk assessments.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, for laying out in a nice, simple way of the areas that you've highlighted, ranging from financial operations all the way to remote worker risks. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes that we have left is talk a little bit about how you can apply the SafePass digital platform to assess, mitigate risk. What is some of the customers doing, and share one customer story with you in the time we have. And we do have time for Q&A, so this is, again, to benefit the attendees. And if you can, put your question in the chat box. We'll pick those up towards the end of the structured presentation so we can help answer any questions. Obviously, we won't know your specific situations, but we'll do the best we can. So SafePass always, focused in our 15 years history to help companies move from an informal, reactive to a proactive and optimized approach. And more than ever, this is critical and crucial for organizations to be more proactive, given that almost all of us got caught off guard with the pandemic. So one of the things that technology like SafePass helps you do is become more proactive and be optimized, that you need readjust those broken processes that Dan talked about, and understand your risk early that are emerging, and before they materialize, you're able to prevent or mitigate those risks at least. And so, the cost of findings under a pandemic is very high, right? If your auditors are reporting certain findings, whether it's in your financial reporting area that Dan touched on, or one of the risks around remote work, such as data access and privacy, they're all going to cost us, multiple folds more. And there's data to support that, research to support that, but you have the best knowledge is what you have in-house. So just imagine the remediation efforts that you would have to go through for every finding that's reported, whether self-reported or independently reported by your external auditors. So I think having a proactive approach is critical. The way you get there is by having an automated audit risk and compliance framework. So if you're relying on spreadsheets and emails, or as Dan said, through some collaborative tools that are good to get started, but they're not sufficient for you to have a successful controls framework. So this will be the time to, when you assess your new risk, business continuity risk, let's say, document them into a framework that has the action plan, the remediation plan built in, so you can maintain, whether it's a compliance with the specific regulations. Like I said, most of our customers are public. So it's simple as just doing your SOX certifications for 302, 404. I've been doing those on a manual paper pencil. This will be the time to digitize those. Same thing with audit itself. So these are your fundamental, foundational blocks. And if you have all this automated, great, you're ahead of the curve. And so, maintain that and keep going with it. On top of that is access governance. So that's an area that number of our customers are reaching out to you. I mentioned a story about a telecom company earlier that's going live today, or this week rather, I think tomorrow is their go live, with one of our tools called iAccess to enable them to improve self-service user provisioning. But there's also, a number of our customers that are losing support from outdated software. A number of our customers use other third-party tools as well, and they're coming to us and saying, can we turn on flip this additional switches in your software, because SafePass is fully integrated. So for example, if you're using a really old segregation of duty tool where the vendor has stopped supporting it, or it's just outdated, it doesn't cover all the risks that are in your latest digital platform, then this would be a good time to consider proactively upgrading that and mitigating any access risks that are elevated as a result of more people having access to support your infrastructure and your employees and staff. We recommend continuous controls monitoring because of the process risks that Dan identified earlier and the studies that I presented before that. And that's because again, not only the remediation is hard, but also detection of risk is harder, right? Because you can't walk into the next cubicle and ask the person in payables whether they paid the same invoice twice because of mistake, because we're all working for home. So while collaboration is very important, it requires a more structure around your monitoring of that business activity. So what continuous controls monitoring will help you do in this environment, and all those controls that are in your policy procedure documents and your process flows, they will become alive, they'll become automated. So if there's a risk of a duplicate payment being made, or somebody just having difficulty using purchasing system and they need to get a new supplier onboarded and they skip a step, or they forgot to do the PO and they issue the PO where the invoice comes in, those training issues that are happening and impacting, maybe there's a shift in the workforce. So continuous monitoring around your key processes, your significant processes where whether it's impacting your assets or your income, those are the areas where you'd want to enable that. And we provide a continuous monitoring workflow enabled system. So not only are you getting alerts, but also getting full remediation. So you can see in a closed loop manner how your organization is responding remotely to risks as they are adjusting to the new process and workflows. On top of that, obviously, the process embedded control as well. I gave you an example again of that self-service access, but self-service can be a great tool right now to enable remote workers to be able to help themselves, especially as organizations under pressure to, cut cost, right? So right now is not a good time to go to CFO and ask for a bigger budget for headcounts. It's probably the opposite right now, unfortunately, for many organizations. So I think making your processes, whether it's your procurement process, making it more self-service, whether it's a customer order process. What I mean by that is you can leverage the self-service capabilities on our platform to create a workflow that is aligned with your current business need and integrates fully into your ERP system. So for example, if you're receiving invoices in your mailbox, whether it's your virtual mailbox or physical mailbox, you can do the approval process in SafePass workflow, and then when the final approval is done, it uploads that through an API into your ERP system, and it gets patched up for processing. So you've cut down all that sneaker net or the cubicle net that used to go on in the past, and to make your overall process more sustainable. So embedded controls in the process is a big opportunity to mitigate the risk we just talked about earlier. And then finally, analytics, right? So having better visibility. The one thing that my clients are telling me now more than ever is the lack of visibility, the clarity they're looking for to forecast their business, to understand their customers, their supply chain, their employee workloads. So it's a significant fog on top of the business, which is difficult to make good decisions if you don't have clarity, right? So that's an obvious fact. And so having analytics is really important because we are collecting the information around access and controls and monitoring and process. audits and risks, and all of this can be combined together into nice dashboards that you can generate yourself. And then having all this data available helps you predict and give you more clarity on Q3 and Q4 of this year in 2021 to help guide your investors and your stockholders better. So predictive analytics is a way to help you become more proactive in managing risk. How we do that are through 30 plus products. We don't have them all on this sheet. Obviously, we can't fit them all, but this is a busy slide. So I'll just kind of highlight the ones I've talked about on the previous slide. So for example, audit management, risk and compliance management, and any kind of regulatory impact that you're seeing from lending facilities that you have taken advantage of. They may come with their own covenants and compliance issues. So be sure to check those and enable the compliance management capabilities. We do provide you a set of rules and repository that's been upgraded for the knowledge we've gathered during the pandemic over the last 60, 90 days through our partners and customers. So you will get an access to some content of whether it's business continuity policies that you need to beef up, or new rules you got to apply to your processes, or the risk and control matrix that needs to be revised. So it all comes with content, and that gets you a jump start towards improving your foundational challenges around policy and so forth that Dan talked about earlier. On top of that is your access control. So I've mentioned iAccess. That's the one product that we're seeing continuous demand for. And it's interesting, it's not just the remote access itself, although that's the big focus. It's also the auditing of access that's becoming challenging, right? So if you have ServiceNow or some other ticketing system where you're producing your, where you're producing the provisioning requests as part of your audit program, and then seeing how the auditors can confirm that that is exactly the access granted, you almost have to go through a reconciliation process. So a number of our customers are reaching out to us and asking us to help them through iAccess to eliminate that additional audit fatigue that's been created. So you go to your help desk, you ask for additional access, you're working remotely. Now that access is granted in your ERP system or some other data source. Now you got to reconcile the two to make sure that just because you asked for access to general entries, you didn't get the access to also post those journal entries. And so that's creating a lot of burden on our auditors and therefore our finance and business community. And so we're seeing a need for doing that, and also just being able to implement and enforce policies more proactively. And then to mitigate the risk, as I mentioned earlier, on a materialized risk, customers are asking us that, since they've elevated the access, it's about trust and verify, right? So being able to monitor what people are doing with that elevated access. For example, if more people have the ability to create a supplier and pay a supplier, did that risk materialize? Because we took off some of the safeguards we had in place, relying more on what we call compensating controls in the risk business, right? So are you relying on compensating controls? Are those compensating controls automated? For example, if you're doing bank recs the old-fashioned way in spreadsheet, could that be automated by looking at your bank transactions and your journal entries and doing that automated reconciliation? So your finance staff that's also remote can free up and focus more on important issues like understanding the assets and liabilities on your balance sheet and doing more variance analysis. Same thing with suppliers. You may be switching suppliers. You may have supplier information switching, like bank accounts. That's an opportunity for fraud and risk. For example, if somebody has access to make changes supplier bank accounts, should they go and put a employee or friend's bank account? So when the automated payment batch runs, it goes out there and produces the wrong results. And we're still mandated by data privacy policies. Data protection is just as important as it was before COVID-19. And so we're seeing customers concerned about CCPA, which is the California law, not to mention GDPR in Europe, which is impacting a number of our multinational global customers. And I actually have another webinar later on today with a group out of UK to talk about data protection and how, especially in the healthcare sector, how that's impacting our customers. And then process controls around your key processes. So I'll just pick on 2 or 3 here. Financial close is one that's getting a lot of attention from our customers to just kind of streamline and automate that more, so they don't fall back on their external reporting to their stakeholders. Procurement, changing quite a bit, the process and the flows, and so being able to streamline, automate the procurement process more. Document management, people, how do you onboard new employees and offboard if you need to? So, all of those workflows are not built into many of the current systems that customers have, so they need to quickly adopt a streamlined self-service workflow where possible, so the HR folks, the finance folks, the purchasing folks can get all the work done in less time and do it more efficiently without creating additional risks to the business. And then dashboards on the top of all that. So Safe Insight is our predictive analytics tool that can go across any of those other objects within the SafePass platform and combine that with the objects, another data source like your ERP system, which is through our tool in green on the left, which is called Data Probe. So Data Probe will actually take a snapshot of, let's say, your supplier object in your Oracle e-business suite or Oracle Cloud or SAP or whatever you have, and it's going to look at, for example, the OFAC list if you're onboarding a new supplier, or if you use a third-party service like Dun & Bradstreet or Dow Jones, they have supplier third-party risk management type services. So it'll check that against the service and then give you a response whether that supplier should be onboarded or put on hold till further investigation is conducted. Same thing with in banking industries, there's a need for anti-money laundering, so know your customer policies. So you leverage this platform to just streamline that, onboarding of not just employees and staff, but also customers and suppliers as you reorganize and move towards a resilience framework with the reopening of businesses and economies. So Insight tools are very helpful for that, and they give you the flexibility to address new risks proactively and assess those risks in the process as well. I won't have time to dig in too much detail around this analytics tool, but since this topic today is risk assessment, I did want to just share some of the basics on how it all comes together. So Safe Insight, as I mentioned on the previous slide, enables you to look at objects within SafePass as well as the connected systems that connect into SafePass by you granting access to that. So it's a quick setup. It takes us to establish a secure connection through Data Probe within a day or so once we have all the grants set up. And then we can go in and apply the rule set that I mentioned on the previous slide. So we have a catalog of 1,000+ business rules. So you don't have to start from scratch. You can start with some business continuity rules that are being adopted as best practices by the market, and the objects also. So instead of creating an object from scratch, we have a supplier object that you can map to, let's say, an Oracle system, etc. And you'll start seeing quick access to your bottlenecks, right? So as soon as you apply the rules, it'll show you that, for example, you're unable to ship products because some key component supply chain is broken down, so you're unable to recognize revenue that you're expecting and forecasting for second quarter or third quarter, right? So that's the type of bottlenecks that you'll be able to discover by applying rules logic to a metadata using Safe Insight, whether the data is in SafePass or in a data source outside of SafePass. Data discovery. So I think Dan covered that earlier. Data discovery includes looking for access to key data elements, especially around your protection laws, data protection laws. So whether it's under the GDPR principles or CCPA or HIPAA, any of those mandates that you're impacted by, you can discover very quickly, intuitively, for example, which tables and objects contain social security numbers, national IDs, date of births, et cetera, et cetera. So just because you're opening up your systems more for remote work doesn't mean you have to give up on all the controls you have over your data or had over your data because now they're extended. So data discovery is very helpful to identify risk, and then analyzing the risk on using some algorithms. So, whether you want to apply Benford analysis to your invoicing and payments to identify any fraud, or you want to do some variance analysis on your account balances, which may be fluctuating as a result of your global trade, or that's impacted, or just even local. Just the balance accounts. If I live in Dallas and most of our customers in Texas that I work with personally one-on-one, and so variance analysis is very helpful to them right now with the fluctuation in oil prices. So be able to quantify the risk. I think our executives know how to qualify the risk, but it's that latent pain that they have right now in being able to really quantify that. That's where data helps. To make a more informed decision about the crisis management that we're all managing right now through. And then finally, what is the bottlenecks? Once you know the bottlenecks and you understand the risk and you know the data risk that Dan talked about, then it's time to kind of start thinking about optimization, right? So how do we reorganize our work for the current new normal, as many of us are calling it? And so being able to readdress your orders and your inefficiencies, the bottlenecks, and reroute them through more modern workflows and digital platform that SafePass provide. Being able to measure things better, more proactively, right? So setting up those KPIs in our dashboards, and when something is outside the threshold, whether it's the product that's shipped to you, or you have shipped the product and you have a variance on your tolerances that's outside the acceptable limit, informing the customer, the supplier, the purchasing department, the order management department, to make sure those problems don't become bigger problems, right? It's a one-off issue that can be addressed proactively, prevented from happening over and over. So being able to enable those measures through workflows and through that monitoring capability I talked about. And finally, simulating for changes. So, it's because of lack of clarity right now, companies are doing plan A, B, and C, right? The best case, the worst case, and everything in between. And so being able to do that, simulated analysis based on elements, trying out different inputs and running different business scenarios to make sure that, your plans are battle tested for whatever's to come next. So the fact that we can grab data from different data sources, provide that analytics capability, is a good way for you to find the hidden risk and emerging risk and focus on the opportunities where you can move forward. One example of how our customers are doing that, before I get into the case study, I know we're kind of short on time here, so I'll spend just a very little time on it. But basically, once you identify the incidents, because of the unique capability of the platform, you can do the remediation in the ERP system directly, right? So there's a lot more behind this technology that I won't have time to get into, but what I want to focus on is a quick minute on case studies. Before I go there, I just want to let you know that we support many different systems, and through this configurable ETL, we started off with Oracle. That's my background, but we now support SAP, Microsoft, Workday, and the other technologies as well. So the same methodology has been extended for other data sources. Starting with a risk assessment approach, looking at key risk indicators, looking at where the risk is. That would be you could do it as a survey, you could do it as a assessment through using Safe Insight, and then build out a remote work management plan. How to use this is an example of a process that's automated that I mentioned at the beginning of the session. Where you're essentially automating your user provisioning process using a self-service tool called iAccess in SafePass. So maybe you do a risk assessment using some of the analytics capabilities. You find a bottleneck. Let's say it's your self-service provisioning process or provisioning process for remote work, and then you streamline, automate that. And you get focus more on these types of analytics and dashboards around the risk. So this is showing me in a demo environment that what are my risks by user, by responsibility in Oracle, and by risk levels, how many open issues I have, and what do I got to do. So it makes it very visual and easy for you to manage. So let me take an example of a company that's actually leveraging our technology to get these type of results. Company is a global tire manufacturer based in Ohio, well established, well regarded. You probably, if you drive, you probably use some of their tires at some point. I know I have. They had trouble with factories impacted because of international business shutdown and so forth. A lot of the customer data was actually stuck outside on local on-premise systems outside of US. So the financial team was having difficulty in managing, analyzing raw material costs versus product costs. So they have to, do cost accounting and management of reporting by region, and their disaster recovery and continuity plan was impacted. And so, given the tool I talked about, Safe Insight, ArcPass, they're able to now move forward with better visibility and removing the bottlenecks in those controls. And they've been able to reduce the time it takes them to even compile the analytics by 75%, right? So they can now, using Data Probe, go in and look at the risk that's outside of threshold. We call it key risk indicators, and be able to identify those dashboard issues in dashboards, and then route the workflows to the appropriate control owners and risk owners to go and take appropriate actions. So what it does is right now, one of the things that we're all talking about is PP, other financial restructuring that's going on. So the cost of financing is really important. One of the things that this company was able to do was increase their access to capital by providing better, essentially margins and visibility into their business to the lending institutions that they're working with at the time. So that's a big plus for any organization that's looking to shore up their balance sheet right now with the points that Dan made around the risks that we checked. Also, under business continuity management, they're able to have a more proactive view, so points of failure. So you can find those vulnerabilities in the process, as dynamic as the processes are right now, and identify dependencies. For example, if one element in your supply chain is impacting your ability to push the product out to your customer, because a chemical that you used in making tires is not available anymore because supply chain is impacted. You need to have that resolved before the customer orders are impacted, or it's going to have a direct impact on your income, right? So that's the type of analysis that they're able to do using our analytics capabilities that I talked about. So I'll just pick on some of the key risk indicators that they're using. I won't have time to go through all of them, but this was the kind of a analysis scoping exercise. We went through them with them around various key areas, and I've highlighted some examples around finance, like raw material, sales, product liabilities. Obviously, that's a legal impact, as well as information and supply chain. Some of those areas that Dan touched on as high emerging risks. So we were able to take their, current methodology and approach, which many companies obviously have in place as part of this business continuity or normal planning and forecasting, and really streamline that and automate that by connecting directly to the data sources, where this data was manually collected through IT staff doing queries or spreadsheets and then putting it all together. So of course I refined that, so I've taken any information, but just the format is what I'm sharing with you here. So you can see that the global supply chain was impacted. The contingent cost per unit was shifting with the raw material costs and the visibility on that. So we're able to provide them better visibility, and they can see the analysis on this side. Capacity management in their plants. So plants are opening, shutting down. You've seen all that in the news. So being able to track the capacity of each of those assets and utilization of those assets, those plants in different organizations around the world, and provide that without having to touch manually the data, right? Because right now that's the challenge for most of our customers. Looking at your quality impact, right? You don't want to have quality impacts because you have less workers, and so you need more visibility, make sure your quality standards don't drop or the customers walk away. So being able to track quality, seeing what incidents are occurring, again, gathering that data from various data sources and automating this information in SafePass. Employee communication, looking at your HR systems, how are employees, not just that they're working remotely, but they're collaborating remotely, the concerns are coming up, what's our headcount, simple things like that are in HR systems, but then tying them into other data in your risk and control matrix, where you're lining it up with your key risk indicators and monitoring that better against your HR system in a single platform. And then business continuity planning itself, being able to see, okay, what kind of releases we had planned to roll out and upgrade or move to a different platform. How will that impact our workforce right now? And what's the right time to do certain things? So if we have a major release, maybe we delay that. Maybe this is the time to consider moving to a more digital platform. So those kind of questions around business continuity management that IT folks are using to track tickets and troubles on their current systems and improve that. So with that, I'm out of time and maybe a little bit over actually. So thank you for staying on. And Emma, do we have any questions before we wrap up? Quite a bit of material to cover today.
Yes, we have a question here that says, our team moved to a very rushed remote workforce, and as we are looking to remain remote for some time, where should we start to streamline our processes? Dan, if maybe you could answer that one.
Sure, that's a really good question. And the answer is there's a number of different ways actually. It might be a good idea to start the roles and responsibilities of the different remote or on-site workers in either a temporary basis, or if your organization is moving to a more permanent remote workforce, really looking at the roles for a permanent change. You really want to look at the ways you're securing the platform, and also how any potential breaches, and really do a look back at the security capabilities, and also how maybe that should be redeployed in the future.
Okay, that's great. And we have another one here. Within our organization, several large-scale programs were put on hold. We've seen some progress restarting, but not much. So how can we restart key programs?
So that's another really great question. The remote workforce really has changed the way programs are run, and as programs are run from the bottom up, but really the program leaders should really look at what that impact has been for specific to their organization, and really adjust the communication cadence, the communication types, and again, looking at the right ways to deploy those collaboration platforms specific to those programs.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Any closing comments from you, Adil?
No, again, just appreciate everybody, and stay safe, and reach out to us through our LinkedIn, and Emma, if you can close it out. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Dan, for your participation.
Yes, thanks, Dan, for joining us today, and a big thank you to everyone who joined us. I will be sending you all a copy of the recording shortly. You do have my contact details there on the screen if you wish for a further discussion to see how we can help you understand risk in your organization. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you again next month. So stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.